Hey, howdy, hey. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you doing today? My name's Dustin Cormier. Hope you guys can hear me okay. Welcome to How to Rock Astrology. Today we're finishing up the last of our series talking about Pluto in the 12 houses. This is Pluto in the 12th, for those who've been paying attention. We've been doing this in a series as a part of talking about Astrology Karma and Transformation by Arroyo. But if you came here just for Pluto in the 12th house and you came here just for the goods, you're in the right place. You don't need to watch the rest of the series to get any context. You can just join here and learn all about Pluto in the 12th. Now, for those who might be interested in observing further than this video, to get a little bit more about what Pluto is like in all the houses, feel free to check out the video at the start of this series that says Pluto in the houses. Gives you a little bit more context about what Pluto means as a reincarnational karmic reservoir principle. It's our consistent neurogenetic memory of going forward in one direction or moving away from some other direction that causes us to get stuck in deep neuro programs in this life, which can be the energy of which, the psychic continuum of these energies, can be transmuted, wrangled, grasped, and transmuted, taking the lead of our unconscious grip on a certain set of patterns and using them to pour forth towards confrontations that this incarnation is bringing to us in order to transmute those old familiar patterns and ways of being. This could be in relation to any dimension of consciousness. With Pluto in the 12th, we find a person who might be... this one's an interestingly tricky one. This is kind of a house of liberation, of moksha in the Indian sense. When Pluto is in the 12th, we have someone who is having a hard time coming to grips with a sense of inner peace and contentment no matter what they're doing in reality. It's ironic that this person becomes so obsessed with bliss, with peace, with letting go, with trance experiences, with the feeling that they're opening a pipeline to their own inner energy in some way. These people this might be the type of person who wants to go on a mountain and meditate and attain liberation from the many ways of the world. Needing to go to the bathroom, eat food, converse with people, get locked up and empathic towards the inner subconscious complexes of the people that you deal with. Tripping on your words and getting frustrated with all the little things of life that seem so much less meaningful than your inner bliss and trance consciousness. That's what Pluto in the 12th often brings. And what this person needs to be able to do, in a lot of ways, is find a way to achieve that sense of action in non-action in action. So that when you're cutting carrots, this is a very Zen, Buddhist-y, inner peace vibe. And the people who have Pluto on the 12th would do well to research, these sorts of things of like, what is it that makes your inner peace? What is it that makes you internally satisfied no matter what kind of activity that you're doing? Control of the appetites, control of desires, detachment from the subliminal desire complexes in the psyche, but yet not throwing it out completely. This is a person who wants to make their peaceful moments, their every moment, to feel precious, but you need to find some kind of activity, because the opposite, Pluto, is always engaging the house that it's in order to affect its opposite pole, in order to draw out the wisdom of its opposite pole. In this case, being the 7th house from the 12th, is the 6th house. So here we have a personality that's locked up in a desire to cut things off, to be detached, to have a trance letting go in the 12th house. This might even be somebody who, in past lives, you might be somebody who lived in an ashram, in a Buddhist or a Tibetan or some kind of Hindu ashram where every little detail in life was taken care of for you already. A bell would ring when it was time to eat, and you would be working on being lost in your trance consciousness and you're not even thinking. You would hear the bell and you would say, okay, it seems that life is giving me this routine with which I eat. A plate was put in front of you and you would gobble, 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 and then you would say thank you. You wouldn't even have to wash the dishes. A bell would ring when everybody would go to the bathroom. You would go quietly, silently go to the bathroom and then come back to sitting down and blissing out and moving yourself into a space of non-consciousness, of absorption in the absolute. And you did this so much in your past lives that all of that absorption, that letting go, has become meaningless and unsatisfying. Now you want to engage in all these constant little things while having that same bliss consciousness. You might be the type of person who just every now and then just blots out and just has to let go of things in order to be internally in order to release emotional tensions. The trick for this placement of Pluto is that you need the deep desire is to have the bliss trance consciousness, that 12th house, letting go, and even serving others. The only way that you're really going to get a hold of your ability to be in a trance consciousness is to be moving and working and serving for others, for people who are in need, for people who could use your simple service. Something as simple as planting a community garden, doing work where you're helping to resolve someone else's deep emotional tension. Some people just need someone to talk to, and you could be the type of person who sits with them, rolls your shoulders back, meditates in the way that you've learned to do. You breathe in, you breathe out, and you focus so much on your breathing patterns that the fluctuations of the mind begin to unsettle, and you transmit that peaceful vibration to the person that you're with while they're talking to you. I just want someone to talk to, they might say. And you could be the type of person who listens, breathes, and helps to digest their emotional tension without really doing anything, just listening to them. And by doing this, because you're so good at finding your own emotional release from the wrangled mental mind tangles of the world that you've been wanting to do, by doing this with another person, you learn how to keep that inner peace while still being in the world. In fact, the world might force you to take your head out of that high Himalayan mountain and grab you by the hair and force you into the shit, into the 6th house, the digestion processes, the world of other people and opinions and ideas and conversations and needs, the world of the body, the world of your own body, and the body of those who are also in states of disarray in the material world. This Pluto in the 12th emits a very mystical desire mode of consciousness, and the desire for bliss, for absolute absorption, is so strong that the material world can fall apart in unseemly ways because you are so desirous of being in absolute absorption. And this is the tricky pull that needs to be found out for this person. Now, Pluto in the 12th house has negative connotations, but Pluto, if it is well placed, if it's got aspects, if it's got positive aspects from benefics like Venus or Jupiter, Mercury, if it's a benefic, if it's associated with other benefic planets, or if, on the other hand, if the ruler of Pluto's sign also is in a good place. If the ruler of Pluto's sign is in the 5th or the 9th house, or if it's got aspects from Venus or Jupiter or positive planets, these things help to support and show support for the ground that Pluto is standing on. So the 12th Lord is it's the bliss that we kind of stand on before we act. You need to have if you have a good 12th house, then you can continue to do your first house responsibilities and expression and creative duties. You can do them because the back of your mind doesn't have any tangles and is released and is let go. So that's why having a strong 12th house Lord is important for everybody, particularly for you. This Pluto might literally obstruct you. You might waste energy doing things because you don't have an inner sense of peace. You might go and try to identify through the first house, because the 12th house is just behind the first house. So you might go with your first house and try to, depending on what your rising sign is, if you're a Cancer rising and you've got Pluto in Gemini in the 12th house, then the Cancer in you might want to get people to do the responsible things that bring you compassionate joy with others, that make you responsible, that make you adaptable. You might want to do these things, but you don't have the internal peace because Pluto is in the 12th house. Pluto will teach you that you need to learn to have inner peace while you do the first house Cancer thing, so whatever your rising sign is. And the placement in that case, the placement of Mercury, if Mercury is in the 5th house or the 9th house, if Mercury has positive aspects to it, it will provide a channel for the Pluto in the 12th house, because Pluto is in the 12th house in Gemini. And Pluto, in that case, leans on that Gemini and Mercury, which rules Gemini. Mercury is providing the channel for that Pluto energy to go out in a constructive way so that they can learn about how to be peaceful within while also balancing out their needs in the material world, the managerial duties. In fact, even for this type of personality, whatever is the 12th house Lord could be a perfect way for you, a necessary way for you to find inner peace within action. Especially in that case because it's Mercury that we're talking about there. But, so this 12th house Lord is in the health of it. If it's got positive aspects from its friends or just from Venus or Jupiter, any benefic, this will help that planet express its potentials, which will allow Pluto to not get gestated with too much of this emotional tension. It'll have a valve for expressing this bliss tension that it wants to get but can't get. If you don't find some constructive, constant way to act in the world, then this 12th house Pluto is going to erupt and you might have a nervous breakdown. You might need to go on a spiritual retreat and drop all of everything in your life in order to find that inner peace and get back to that center. And this might be a constant recurring theme in your life until you can settle your 6th house as well as your 12th house. If you have a very strong 6th house, but you don't have a strong 12th house Lord, then you might be so wrapped up staying busy with your managerial things and constant routines that you never give yourself the bliss that Pluto is seeking in the 12th house. But it will make you really want to. And at some point you will have this meltdown and you will learn how to achieve inner peace within the crazy world of living on Earth and having all these responsibilities. So, that being said, again, Pluto is not inherently bad in any position. It has to do with the health, the aspects to Pluto, whether Pluto has trines from other planets or positive planets for the 12th house, as well as the position of the sign Lord of Pluto. But I digress. Either way, the point is that it's up to the person, the individual chart, to define whether these qualities that we're going to describe now are going to come out in a positive way or a negative way. And it depends on the individual, the evolution of the soul, to show whether they can take the heavy karmas of Pluto, the reincarnating karmic genetic continuum, and transmute it, get a hold of it, wrangle it, and put it in constructive places so that it doesn't take you over. Pluto is you either open the channel to be in service to things outside of yourself, and you allow Pluto, you become either a channel for Pluto, or you suffer by trying to be the power of Pluto. This is something we constantly hear in all these books with Pluto. wherever Pluto is, you have to allow yourself to be a channel for the bliss of something bigger than yourself. You have to get out of its way. You have to be a supporter for something bigger than yourself, because then the world around you will understand that you're doing this sacrificial thing. So all in all, we're about to read, that was my own little spiel. We're about to read from Astrology, Karma, and Transformation by Stephen Arroyo. Keep in mind, he notes that this reading is meant as a guideline for interpreting Pluto in the 12th. How positively or negatively the various potentials that are being expressed here, how positive or negative Pluto in the 12th will express, it's up for you as an astrologer to judge, or for your astrologer to tell you. It's up to the quantification of the planet. So, again, this is Pluto in the 12th by Stephen Arroyo. Let's see what he says about it. With this position of Pluto, the person must transform the quality of his or her emotional life by an adherence to some belief or transcendental truth, which has the effect of liberating the self from a morass of confusing emotions. Basically, you need to find some inner peace, some inner pillar, some dimension of the Atma, the self, the continually recurring center of your identity, and which will always have a quasi-spiritual vibe, because we know that we change all the time as humans. Our personalities change. You're a different person from who you were when you were 2 years old. You're a different person from who you were 10 years old. But yet, some of all the snake skins do stay. Some of those phases from those times, even though you've become a completely different person, much of it still stays. And so we have this morass of confusing emotions from the past that we've stuck on. And in order to have a sense of self-center and peace, you need to get a grip on the mind, which is the constant pure awareness that permeates all time, that permeates all these confusing emotions that you're reliving, possibly at all times. You might feel down in the dumps and agitated all the time, because Pluto in the 11th is amplifying the past life signature of actions and effects and emotional reactions and behaviors. And just going through these is good karma for the soul. It's a positive thing that Pluto in the 12th, basically no matter what you do, if you're feeling a confused morass of emotional content and you still find some way to get through life, to still enjoy love, to still enjoy working hard and being satisfied, and all the things, all the four dharmas of the human being, which is kama, enjoyment, artha, which is wealth, moksha, which is liberation and enjoyment, and what am I missing there? Moksha, dharma, kama, and artha. So those four dimensions of human life, wealth, enjoyment, liberation, and responsible duty and satisfying duty. These are coming from the Vedic sense of philosophy. If you can do all those things while still existing in this confusing Plutonian amplified morass of emotional tension, then you are doing your dharma. You are doing the work of getting through and being with this confusing emotions while having the center, the willpower to zero in on it, to understand that you can still act even while you're agitated. You can still perform good work, and it's a sacrifice. And what are you sacrificing for? What is the reason for you for getting through the pain of every moment in life? You need to find you will likely find some reason for it. And it might be quasi-theological, it might be spiritual, but it might just be like logical, scientific. It's just, you might just come to realize that, well, there's no use crying over spilled milk. There's no use, it's not logical for me to just get frozen in this gestated psychological grip. And it's not useful for me to do nothing. I don't feel any joy when I just do nothing. So it's just what it is. Behold, like a flower cracking through the concrete, you might just find yourself moving forward despite your emotional and psychological rigidity and locked in neurological patterns. Why am I going forward? I don't even know. This is the 12th house bliss that can come. Being in bliss while still being in pain. And you can even teach others to do this. So it's a good position spiritually, although from the Earth's perspective, you will be taking on, for some reason you've chosen to take on the karmic coin of internal subjective blasé stagnance and an internal emotional negative complex. For some reason you've decided to take that on in this life in order that you can purge it, in order that you can purge your internal dimensions and universe of this grip that you unconsciously have. Tough challenge, but always rewarding. That's what's interesting about this particular. You are spiritually lucky to have Pluto in the 12th, even if it's not well placed. But some who live on the material world might express that it sucks that you have some kind of internal complex, some kind of psychological hang-ups, some kind of tension that just comes through you and just permeates your existence. In Earth terms, this seems difficult, but the challenges of Earth, of course, are all the more enjoyable to one who is a magician, for whom the purpose of the tension is the greater than the sum of its parts. Right? So, thus, this is the type of person who must transform the quality of their emotional life by adherence to some belief or transcendental truth or just realization, which has the effect of liberating the self from a morass of confusing emotions. Often, this reorientation will require long periods of loneliness and abstention from social interaction. Retreat, spiritual retreat. For dealing with other people often has the effect of again stirring up the old troublesome emotions that the person is trying to transcend. These people should be careful not to allow one-track emotional guilt patterns and feelings of self-persecution to gain the upper hand. The key to this orientation is to establish definite spiritual attitudes towards all life. And if you're lucky, you will get a sense of what this is and why it's important, especially if you have a good Jupiter and a good ninth lord. Having a good Jupiter and a good ninth lord will give you the faith and optimism that you can and should and will even feel good about getting over your own internal emotional complexes and psychological rigidity. Look to your Jupiter, look to benefic trines and positive aspects to Jupiter. Look at the house that Jupiter's in and the health of the house and the lord of Jupiter, as well as the ninth lord. All the same things, because the ninth house relates to Jupiter in the same way that Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. The 12th house is similarly, they say anciently that Pisces rules Jupiter as well, or Jupiter rules Pisces rather. So that's why the 12th house is jiving on this metaphysical sense of the big picture meaning of all life, the subjective fulfillment despite material world hardships. Jupiter will give you the optimism to know and to sense that even the simplest thing as waking up in the morning, having a coffee, even though you're having all this internal emotional pain, the optimism of knowing that you're doing something special for your soul going forward. Even just waking up can be a blissful Dharma experience for somebody who has a good Jupiter with this position. And if you don't have a Jupiter, consider healing methods of in Vedic astrology, we talk about gemstones and mantras that bring in the consciousness of faith and optimism and Jupiterian qualities that might help you get through this. I mean, if you're not into that, just positive thinking in general. Finding a way to make positive thinking not seem just superficial. The law of attraction could either do a lot for you, or it could just feel fake and not the real thing. And you got to find that out in your own experience, right? The key to this orientation is to establish definite spiritual attitudes towards all of life, the meaning of it all. Once this spiritual transformation has progressed to a certain point, the individual can then develop the capacity to experience the unity of all life, which lies beneath the outer forms. It can bring great spiritual apprehension, great transcendental compassion. There can be some incredible spiritual advocates and aspirants who have Pluto in the 12th house. And in general, this can bring somebody who can get through anything. You know, if you're having like a 4-year stint where your father is divorcing in this ugly divorce with his wife of so many years, and they're splitting their property, and the dad is just all a mess, and you can sit with your dad throughout those 4 years the whole time and have the patience, because you've been working this out in your own universe for so long. You can sit, ventilate, let him spit out his venom all over somebody, all over you, and then you can sit calmly and quietly and just help perpetuate the next step that they want to get to, which is post-anger, which you are already in the space and holding the space for them to see and to follow and to get to. It can be an incredible internal permeating peace consciousness that comes from the heavy opposite of that. You might go through your whole life for a long time just feeling internal tension and anger. But once you unchink that chain, you pour your bliss just by example, by leading by example of inner bliss, peace, and happiness. People they get the vibe that you're putting out there. Now, that was a reading from Stephen Arroyo. I've been supplementing this reading today with all these videos with Astrology, a Cosmic Science by Isabel M. Hickey, who is a well-known Western astrologer. She's kind of got like in this particular one especially, with the 12th house vibe, there's a religious, theological tone to this, which I think is useful to hear, and if you're a spiritual person, you can get a lot out of it. But if you're reading this, if you've been listening to this, and you're a scientifically minded person, consider that you don't need to be, if you're an atheist even, you will find some way to have a rational, logical reasoning behind why having a positive psychological apprehension of your role in the world and of your life and the way you live, you will apprehend a positive logical reason for being happy, for not being depressed. And that could be your spiritual thing. You know, that could be your philosophical, it might be more of a philosophy thing for you than a spiritual thing. So when you read all this, consider the spiritual, quasi-religious language, but try to see past it in order to get the meaning of the principle behind the selfless service, karma, getting out of your own way. That's part of what the karmic aspect of this placement means. I'm just noticing our friend Ankur Soni has decided to join the discussion. Nice to see you, Ankur Soni. I hope I'm saying your name right. So as usual, folks, this is a live chat. Feel free to make a comment, mention any comments, questions that you'd like, and I'll try to speak to them as befits the nature of our conversation. And I'll try to speak to any questions and concerns before the end of this video. Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra. Ankur is mentioning Vedic astrology. Excellent. Well, nice to see you, my friend. And BPHS, Parashara is definitely my highest lineage. Thank you. I'm a Vedic astrologer myself. I consider myself Jyotish, and I'm trying to transmit the wisdom of Pluto and the Western astrology to Vedic astrologers and Jyotishis. My Lagna is Leo rising. You can tell I look like a lion, don't I? I get it all the time. So, Ankur, if you'd like to talk a little bit at the end of this, for those who have been watching, I'm going to finish this reading of Pluto in the 12th house, and then I'll speak to any more comments at the end of this video. again, we're reading from Isabel Hickey's Astrology, a Cosmic Science. This book was written around like 50s and 60s, finally released in the late 60s. And this is a reprinted version from about 1994, which includes this data on Pluto, the planet Pluto, and what it means to our karma, to reincarnation, and to transformation. In this book, she used the language of Pluto is the lower parts of Pluto is our unconscious reactive karma that's pouring through. In this case, we have this reactive karma to build up emotional angst and energy in the 12th house and trying to get away from it, to see it, to be in trance with it, while to fully absorb it, to not let go of it, to not ignore our pains from the past, but also be objective and diligent and detached from them in order that we can act in the world in as much as we need to do in a satisfying enough way. Finish all the work we need to do, and once it's all done, we find the perfect time to let that go. That work is done. Now I can sit and be at peace, enjoy my internal peace, my sensual baths, my sound baths, my yoga, enjoying cannabis, enjoying friends and letting go and laughing and all these things. And once it's time for me to do my next project, I can move forward towards that without too much explosiveness. This might be the kind of person who goes on a mountain in the Himalayas and meditates and says, oh my God, I need to get out of here. I need to live my life. And then so you go to America, you find an apartment, you work at some crappy job, you work for the man, and you work to try to do the opposite of that inner peace that you were seeking. And now you wrangle out your nerves because now you're on the other extreme. And then you say, oh, screw this. This is not what I wanted. I want to go back to the mountain and meditate. You go to the Himalayas and you sit and you try to get back to that state of peace. And then you're like, oh my God, this is not what I want. Why am I back here? See the bang, the poles? That's Pluto working in extreme polarity. Minerva is when you integrate the two poles, so that while you're in the Himalayas, you're also helping out, asking, you're on the mountain and you're asking the guru, can I get you a glass of water? Or can I do this? Can I do some things to stay busy, but finding inner peace within that? And then when you go home to America, you find your job, you do just enough for your boss, then you come home and diligently allow yourself to find that inner peace within the 6th house craziness. This is how you integrate the 6th and the 12th house, instead of just having bang, 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 extremes in this direction for 5 years and then extremes in this direction for 5 years, and then, never really enjoying the center that you are, expressing both. And when you do find that integration principle, it will happen through Isabel Hickey calls this the Minerva dimension of Pluto, where you're enjoying the best of both and they're not dissolving each other. When you do this polar thing, you'll destroy yourself, wasting energy running away from the center of what you are. And this is when the acid of Pluto dissolves the beaker, the container that holds it. What you want to do is the Minerva thing, which can keep both dimensions of both poles, the 6th house and the 12th house, without destroying yourself. So that's, again, my own interpretation. This turned out to be the longest video in this series, but that's okay. The 12th house kind of needs it. There's a lot to be said about Pluto in the 12th, as we're about to read. This is Isabel Hickey, Astrology, a Cosmic Science, talking about Pluto in the 12th house. Isabel Hickey says, if we are right about Pluto being exalted in Pisces, which is something that I would debate. This is really Isabel Hickey's intuitive. She even says she doesn't know how sure she is, because for these outer planets, there's no ancient dictum of their exaltation points or their debilitation points. No one even really technically knows that Pluto is ruled by Scorpio, or that it's like in its own sign in Scorpio. No one really knows that per se. It's just what we're intuiting collectively over time. And Isabel Hickey is saying here that there seems to be in her generation, when she was writing this book, she seemed to have intuited that Pluto is exalted in Pisces. It's an interesting thought, but consider that it's debatable still. If we are right about Pluto being exalted in Pisces, Isabel says, then the position of Pluto in the 12th house is going to be very important. I think that Pluto in the 12th house is going to be important no matter what, even if we don't come to find that Pluto is exalted in Pisces. This house, the 12th house, as the sign it rules, Pisces, is the most psychically permeable. Like I said, you might be perpetuating Plutonian emotional vibrations to people without even realizing it. We said this basically about Pluto in the 6th, too, where you might say something to somebody and they might constantly think, like, am I antagonizing you? And you're just like, no, I'm just always in a state of tension. And they're like, did I say something? You know, it's you accidentally give out attention to people, at least until you get a hold of this thing. Neptune is placed at the meeting point between our solar system and an inferior solar system. I think that's meaning like outside of our own. This is an interesting little astronomical thing that she says here. It's from this extraneous solar system that Pluto draws its primitive force from outside of our own, from the galaxy. It's one of the ambassadors of the furthest reaches of the galaxy. That is why Pluto is known as a dark planet. And this is an interesting point. Isabel Hickey says, beyond Pluto lies Minerva, a planet not yet discovered. And she makes a footnote regarding that idea of hers. Interesting. We'll see, it's 2020 now, and we haven't discovered this extra Minerva planet. Maybe it's an asteroid, I don't know. Weird little reference, but only the few, Isabel Hickey goes on, only the few who are light-filled and ego-free will see Minerva and will recognize her. And will recognize her power, and will understand the Minerva power that can come through everybody, potentially. Those completely caught in the personality, in this with Pluto here, will see Pluto as a malefic. We'll see it's a bummer that I'm going through this material world experience of pain, like we said. But those who recognize this planet, Pluto, Minerva, as a necessary purging process for the soul, and are willing to go through the purging, will see light on the other side of darkness, and will see a meaning and purpose, and even a joy and a bliss, having come from this internal experience of darkness and pain. Ironically, that's why it's the tough position. But the most challenging ones are the ones that can be most rewarding. Anyone with 12th house planets of any sort feels cribbed, cabined, and confined by life on Earth. It's difficult for them to submit to the rules of the road and to live by these rules. The enemy lies within, in this position. And this is especially true if Pluto is in the 12th house. If it's Pluto that's there, any planets in the 12th house will bring this feeling that the enemy is your own livingness, your own conception of life. But with Pluto, this is especially so. The 12th house rules the subconscious. Neptune rules the collective unconscious. And perhaps one day we will find that Pluto will rule the collective conscious being. Psychedelic phrasing coming from Isabel Hickey here. Can tell a lot of her work on Pluto is rather speculative, because this came out in the 1990s. But it still holds wisdom. The highest side of Pluto in the 12th house means the willingness to be a channel to help those who are limited and afflicted. The willingness to be nothing in order to serve humanity can bring the wisdom aspect of Minerva, of the positive aspect of this Pluto, into operation. It's when you just start, it's the act of selfless service towards others for their own sake is already a step towards releasing your own neurotic concern with your own emotional reality. Once you start just making a habit of pouring this energy into others for no thought of reward, you're already pruning your prison chains in the personality. As long as the individual tries to live a personal life, in the sense that they choose to enhance their own personality and their own power in this life with this position, they are confused and they can lose their sense of identity. When you try to live a proper earth life and that's your own soul goal. He bogs down in a swamp of self-pity and self-recrimination because I feel bad that I lived only for this reason and I've been wasting my life, and I feel guilt complexes that only carries themselves forward. The only way to get out of that guilt complex is to just start living now for the bliss of expression and not for self-containment. Again, the choice that is so intimately tied with the 12th house is serve or suffer. The choice is there. Only through service and the dissolving, the slow, patient, consistent dissolving of the personal will freedom from the negative use of energy. Sorry, let me say it again. Only through service and the dissolving of the personal will, the gradual, consistent hacking and dissolving of the selfishness of the personal will freedom from the negative use of any energies in the 12th house come. It's especially so with Pluto there. So this has been a long one, so I'm just going to let you guys drop off here with this. Thank you for everybody watching. I'm just letting you know, Ankur, Sony, since you've asked. Leo is my Lagna, and Sagittarius is my moon. Lots of fire. So thank you for watching, Ankur, Sony, and for anybody else who's been watching. I'm Dustin Cormier for How to Rock Astrology. I hope you guys have enjoyed this series. Keep an eye on watching live, for those who are watching live. I'm going to call my friend who just called me first. But we're going to, at the end of the series, we're going to continue talking about aspects of Pluto coming right now. And keep watching more, because the next time we do this series, we're going to talk all about Saturn and its transits. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know, because I really enjoyed doing this series. Take care. Thanks for watching.